Good evening. It is sobering to realize that by the time William Shakespeare had reached my age, he'd been dead for 10 years. Kind of stole that from Tom Lear, another smart-ass nerd. The opportunity to speak to you tonight about a subject I care about quite a bit has caused me to reflect on why Shakespeare is such a thing for me personally. So, if you'll indulge me, I'll do my best to keep it informative, more importantly, humorous and short. I want to begin by clarifying that what has drawn me to this guy, whose plays have impacted my work and the things that I've explored and the experiences that I've had and enjoyed, have left me questioning. So I'm going to try to work that out this evening. For whatever reason, I'm attracted to notions of right and wrong, good and bad, heroes and villains. I know I'm not alone in this. Was it my Catholic upbringing? The impact of Catholic responsibility, notions of heaven and hell, heightened language, ceremony with staging and musical interludes? Could these have had something to do with it? Possibly. Maybe comic books. My fascination with Iron Man, Batman, the Avengers, and X-Men certainly preceded my interest in iambic pentameter or Hamlet's indecision. Spidey certainly wrestled with some issues centered around revenge. Batman definitely did. Lord of the Rings? Sure. Star Wars? That was definitely in my wheelhouse. It is a period of civil war. The spaceships of the rebels, striking swift from base unseen, have gained a victory o'er the cruel galactic empire now adrift amidst the battle. Rebel spies prevailed and stole the plans to a space station vast, whose powerful beams will later be unveiled and crush a planet. 'Tis the Death Star blast. Pursued by agents sinister and cold, now Princess Leia to her home doth flee, delivering plans and a new hope to hold of bringing freedom to the galaxy. In time so long ago begins our play in star-crossed galaxy far, far away. So you see, I'm not alone in my interests, and they all seem to one way or another, lead back to Mr. Shakespeare. I think it's safe to say that for all of those factors, they've played a part in nurturing my love for Bill, for that is what I call him in friendly company. Bill and I were introduced informally by Gilligan of Island fame, late 1960s. You might remember the episode where Hollywood producer Phil Silvers, of all people, looking for new talent, crashes his plane on the island. Gilligan, the skipper, and the rest of the castaways put together a musical of Hamlet to impress the producer. Hilarity ensues, and the gang again fails to get off the island. What stuck with me was the recurring song, I asked to be or not to be, and that is the question that I ask of me. An earworm of sorts that has stuck with me for over 50 years. Fortunately, later in life, I was properly introduced to Bill and Hamlet in my high school English class. I had, unlike many of my current students, I had an excellent teacher of Shakespeare. Her name was Mrs. Anderson. She told us that Bill's work should not be read silently but aloud. She explained that there was rhythm into the language that not only worked efficiently with the English language, but also replicated the sound of the human heart. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. But most importantly, working, reading, and acting Shakespeare was a challenge. And who doesn't like a challenge? As we made out through Hamlet's first soliloquy, I was fascinated by the idea that this young prince was so overwrought by his father's death and his mother's recent marriage to his uncle that he wished to disappear. At 16 years old, I could relate to that. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, fall, resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Oh God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie. 'Tis the unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Mrs. Anderson introduced me to several Shakespeare plays during my high school years: Macbeth, King Lear, Othello, and The Tempest. Each play offered new challenges and new mysteries to unfold. Macbeth is about king killing. You can't kill the king, she would say. Bad things happen when you kill the king. Remember what happened to Claudius and Hamlet? This is how she helped us to understand Aristotle's Poetics, the great chain of being, and the classical definition of tragedy. And if you're a king, you can't give up your throne either. This was a reference to King Lear, but also Richard II, but I didn't get to that play till college. If you kill the king or abdicate your throne, all hell's going to break loose. Mrs. A set my Shakespearean wheels in motion way back then, and I am eternally grateful to her and king killing. In college, during both my undergraduate and graduate studies, Shakespeare figured prominently in a more practical sense. I got the opportunity to perform Shakespeare's work, not just read it. I was introduced to new and sometimes intimidating things like scansion, operative words, transatlantic speech, image bodies, end-stopping, and elision. My first real mentor was Roy Fleur. He was my first grade acting teacher and was a Shakespeare nut. Working on a set speech or a scene with him was like analyzing quantum physics. Everything was observed, questioned, noted, and explored. Why is it a short line? Why does it begin with a stressed syllable? Is that a Roman or Greek reference? Can you elide anything in the line? By the time you finished working through the text with Roy, every line, word, and syllable was addressed. As a novice student of the acting process in Shakespeare, I began to see the value of commitment to text preparation. If you don't get it, they won't get it. It was like a mantra under Roy's tutelage. In graduate school and early in my professional acting career, I was lucky enough to perform several seasons with the Colorado and North Carolina Shakespeare festivals. One, an outdoor space of about 2,000 seats, and the other playing in 3 separate theaters as well as a student tour. I was working with some of the best in the business, Shakespeare business, that is. Libby Apple, artistic director of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Kent Thompson, artistic director of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival and the Denver Theater Center, Kate Fitzmaurice, founder of the Fitzmaurice Institute for Voice Innovations. I even got a chance to work with Val Kilmer on a production of Hamlet that he was starring in. But that's a story for another time. The 4 years I spent working with Shakespeare's plays in these companies with these artists was nothing short of spectacular. But the connection of an acting class that focused, but the connection that I made during that time with a videotape of an acting class that focused on Shakespeare's text would be a game changer for me. Greg Henry is now artistic director of the American College Theater Festival for the Kennedy Center. And he was a friend of mine from my Colorado Shakespeare Festival days. And he shared with me a video entitled Playing Shakespeare. It featured a bunch of British actors who, aside from a very young Ian McKellen, I didn't know who they were. Of course, later on I realized that the actors were comprised of the stars of the RSC and featured Judi Dench, Ben Kingsley, Patrick Stewart, David Suchet, Roger Rees, and Trevor Nunn. They were all very young, not yet famous, and brilliant. The video was a first of a series of acting workshops that explored the work of an actor performing Shakespeare. And at the helm was a very lean, British, grizzled, middle-aged man in a rumpled cardigan named John Barton. Mr. Barton and Sir Peter Hall created the Royal Shakespeare Company in 1961. Sir Peter went on to achieve godlike renown in the theater circles, while John Barton, perhaps a bit modest in his need for notoriety, remained the company's in-house Shakespeare nerd. In the video, John Barton serves as both MC and ultimate authority of Shakespearean text. His ability to break down challenging and archaic passages from plays that frankly don't get a whole lot of love, Pericles, Two Noble Kinsmen, Troilus and Cressida, and All's Well That Ends Well. But he also promoted the idea that everything the actor needed to perform Shakespeare was in the text. He would draw the actor's attention to things like shared lines, end-stopping, antithesis, and a variety of grammatical tools, all of which that provide the actor creative opportunities. He was like Gandalf, or more appropriately, Prospero. I became an instant fan. Now I'm going to jump ahead a few years. In 1998, I began work at Marshall University, and the nature of my day-to-day life evolved from that of a New York City actor to that of a college professor. Although I'm proud of my gypsy years as a struggling artist, the timing was right to take on a new challenge and explore new horizons. I did what all new conscientious junior faculty do. I created a curriculum, advised students, served on committees, graded exams, in my case, directed plays, attended conferences, yada, 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 yada. In my first couple of years, I put together classwork for 6 or 7 different classes, and I was happier than a pig in shit. I loved the challenge, loved my students, loved sharing what I knew, and frankly, loved finding out what I didn't know. Which brings me back to John Barton. I was to teach a Styles of Acting class in the spring of 2000. And I knew that Shakespeare would figure prominently in the course. I saw it as an opportunity to grow in my own knowledge of the subject, as well as hopefully educate my students. By this time, it had been many years since my introduction to the infamous Playing Shakespeare series. But I thought, wouldn't it be cool to share it with my students and see if they liked it, or shared my enthusiasm for it? As luck would have it, Drinko Library had 2 episodes of the series on VHS. Perfect, I thought. I'll let John explain antithetical language. I seem to remember that the video was met with a fair amount of enthusiasm. There was quite a bit of joking about the old British guy in a cardigan. I seem to remember Justin McElroy particularly enjoying making fun of John Barton. There was Gandalf the Wizard and Jean-Luc Picard, both looking young and performing Shakespeare, which definitely got their attention. But most importantly, I think it helped to create a shared vocabulary and an understanding that Shakespeare wasn't dull or boring. I mean, sure, it was challenging at times and required concentration and perseverance, but it was worth it. With the help of Playing Shakespeare, I set a course to maintain Shakespeare education at the center of my work at Marshall University. In 2005, I applied and was granted permission for my first sabbatical. I knew that traveling to the Shakespeare motherland would be part of the semester's research. The New Globe was now well established, and Kevin Spacey was playing Richard II at the Old Vic. This was long before Mr. Spacey's legal troubles. And most definitely, I would take the train up to Stratford-upon-Avon and see both the RSC and Shakespeare Homestead, kind of a Disney World for Shakespeare. In the year preceding the trip, I had a chance meeting with a man who changed a lot of things for me. The man's name was Donald Sewell. You probably don't know who he is. Actually, there is a reason you should, because he founded the Denver Theater Center. He was an elderly gentleman who occupied a really cool suite of offices in Denver with a ton of incredible memorabilia. And if you're a Shakespeare nerd or a theater nerd, I wish you could have seen this office. Things like John Gielgud's doctoral robes and personalized letters and pictures from Laurence Olivier and Noel Coward. Amazing stuff, really. When I asked about a picture of Noel Coward, Gertrude Lawrence, and himself as a young man, he told me casually that he had been Noel Coward's business agent. It was very cool. We talked. He asked about my work. I shared with him my plans for sabbatical, and jokingly I said, now, if I could find a way to meet John Barton, I'd really have something to come away with. I can help you with that, Mr. Sewell interrupted. I was stunned. Really? Yes, please. And that was how I got to meet my hero. Now, to say I was nervous meeting John would be an understatement. Most people's fantasies about meeting their idols are just that, fantasy. And of course, for most, the meeting would usually involve movie stars, leaders of nations, or famous athletes. I was meeting John Barton. I rang the bell to his flat, and he responded with a, "Come on up." 3 flights of very steep stairs brought me face to face with a very old version of whom I'd watched in a video for years. No question, it was Mr. Barton. But the 20-plus years had done a number on him. He seemed very pleased to meet me, although that may have been his interest in the bottle of single malt scotch that I had brought along. I had been warned ahead of time that he liked scotch. He had prepared snacks. He had swords hanging on his walls. He had walls of books and posters of plays. He was just like me. We chatted about our backgrounds, drank scotch, ate snacks. We talked about the theater in general and plays that I had recently seen in London. And then I thought, well, I should pose a question about Shakespeare, figuring we'd better get to the matter before I had had too much to drink. He stopped me with a, "Oh, let's not talk about Shakespeare." Huh? For a second, I panicked. No, I'd rather we worked on something. What do you have? I could do the Brutus soliloquy from Julius Caesar. Perfect! I'll pour us a drink and we'll have a go at that. Oh my God. I was going to have a catch with Tom Brady, act with Robert De Niro, cook with Anthony Bourdain. I began. It must be by his death. Now, why does he start with the answer to the argument? And we were off. He literally stopped me 6 words into the piece. We worked for 2 hours on the first 16 lines. As I shook his hand and left his flat that evening, I knew that I would probably not see him again. I thanked him for his time and tried to awkwardly point out that his work had been impactful to me, and that I was grateful for it. He seemed ill at ease with the compliment and was probably glad to be rid of me so he could get back to the scotch. I offer these anecdotal experiences this evening, framed up in the query of why Shakespeare, in an effort to perhaps understand, but more importantly, I think, to encourage our collective work as artists, as Shakespeare nerds, to continue to share the profound worthiness of Shakespeare's plays. I have been most fortunate for the teachers that I've had, the directors I've worked with, my colleagues, and most especially my students. They have all shared their knowledge, passion, and curiosity for Shakespeare and have fueled my obsession more than I ever thought possible. I want to say that I applaud the work being done by my friends here at the West Virginia Shakespeare Festival and the Alchemy Theater Troupe. I admire your commitment to produce plays thoughtfully and creatively that promote what John called the two traditions, the classic and the contemporary. But more than anything else, it brings me joy to see fellow Shakespeare nerds preaching from the good book of Will. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by, from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Thank you. Okay, so, you know, for an academic of 20-something years, you'd think that I would have a lot of experience in doing this kind of thing. I don't. Full transparency. My friend Roy that I mentioned here, my undergraduate teacher, ran a magnet school down in South Carolina, a very good one, for fine arts. And he asked me probably about 6 or 7 years ago to be his commencement speaker. And I was like, come on, Roy, you can do better than me. And he's like, no, I can't. I want you to do it. And so I took it as an opportunity to talk to these students about being an artist and making art in the world and not losing yourself along the way, and then also share with them something that I think is important that I know the assembled people here get, is that we don't get here on our own. Wherever we get to artistically, if we have a life in art, we never get here on our own. We get here on the shoulders of others. And I took that as an opportunity to speak to Roy about that. And so when you guys asked me to do this speech tonight, you know, part of me was like, I don't know what I want to talk about. I mean, you know, when you say keynote, it sounds so highfalutin, and I'm just like, I don't have that much to say about any of it. But I agreed to it because I thought, you know what, I wanted to do it for you guys, but also I wanted to have an opportunity to see if I could do it and what kind of story I wanted to tell. And it was hard. It was hard to kind of think about what is the story to tell. I called Mike a week ago and kind of said, I was thinking maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do that. And God love him, he was like, yeah, do what you want. Thanks. I don't know what I want to do. But it occurred to me that I wasn't quite done yet with that lesson of what we do as students, and then what we do as colleagues, and then what we do as teachers. And I've been fortunate in that, you know, certainly for two of you in this room, I've had you as students and I've had you as colleagues, and I expect to continue having you more as a teacher because I love how you're bringing your love for this work to the public, and you're doing it not in an easy way. My course was much easier. Get hired by a university and they just write you a paycheck every other week. And good, bad, or indifferent. Once you get tenure, you can do that. You guys do it much more difficult. It's much more difficult for what you're doing, you know. So I guess I wanted to continue that discussion. So I hope it wasn't too preachy and it wasn't too biographical. I mean, I wanted to use myself as an example more than wanting to talk about myself. So my greatest fear in life is that people think I'm talking too much about myself. So I don't want that. Anyway, any comments or questions?
Did you steal anything from John Barton's apartment?
No, I didn't. I didn't. You know, it was weird. It was like going to, I mean, the whole apartment was circa 1974. You know, right down to like the avocado-colored fridge and all of it. I mean, I tell you a couple of things that I did take away from it. Not stole, but did take away from it. One was, John was in his late 70s when I saw him. And as I say, he was older. You know, he was an old late 70s. And I was telling him what I'd seen at the RSC, and I asked him about, are you still doing work for the RSC? Because there would be no RSC if it wasn't for him. I mean, he had a huge part in this. And it was sad. He'd been kind of, I won't say he was kicked to the curb, but you could tell that he was not being asked to do anything for them anymore. And it bothered him. And he wasn't sure what his place was in the world anymore. And I felt badly about that. It's interesting, if you do any, this is the book. He hated writing this book, but it was a deal that he made in order to get the series done. So what he did was he literally did a transcription of the tapes and put it in here. But the number of, you know, actors that I respect a great deal that have worked with him that considered him to be Yoda. You know, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, but Kevin Kline, Helen Hunt, everybody sought him out. And what he was able to do in person that I've never been able to master is he can hear, like those speeches that I gave you, he'd have you read it and he could take it apart in his head. And it wasn't like he knew every passage, you know, it wasn't like he does what I do, which is you've got a set number of passages that you're really familiar with. I mean, he'd say, just pull something out of the, you know, pull something out of Titus Andronicus. Okay, oh yeah, that's a good speech, do that one. And he'd say, well, what about this? And what about this? And did you notice this? And then this was kind of cool, and I've heard this from other people as well, that if you look at the last word in every line of Shakespearean text. So if you're reading across the line, the last word, and follow it all the way down to the speech, Shakespeare is able to create a word, like an arc of meaning, just using the last word of each line. It's really incredible. No. But he did make snacks. That was fun. I literally burst out laughing. I've made snacks. And they weren't even really like great snacks. I mean, it was like Cheetos and little rolled salami, and we're drinking, and yeah, that was pretty cool. Any other?
Personal thing for me was, like a lot of people, when you would go in high school, you read some Shakespeare plays. We did Macbeth. It's like, oh yeah, big stuff. And then Arts did it. Mike directed it. And when you, for me, seeing it actually acted, it was like, oh my God, now I get it.
It's a whole different thing.
It was amazing, just how much more. And you didn't have to understand every single word.
Nope.
But you got it. It's
Yep.
like, I see where it's going and why he did it that way.
Yeah.
It was great.
Kevin Kline, after he worked with him, he said, you know, unfortunately our education system is set up a way that, you know, go home and read Act 3 and then we'll discuss it in class. And so young people learn how to read Shakespeare that way. But he said, you know, reading Shakespeare is kind of like reading a symphony on the page. It just, you're not going to get anything. Even if you know music, you're not going to get much out of it by reading it on the page. You have to hear it. I met Kevin Kline too. That was in an elevator.
He didn't make snacks.
Well, and I was like, hi, you're really good. He had just done Benedict and Much Ado, and a friend of mine was in the show, and they were having a party, and they like, come over to the such and such bar, and I was like, okay. So I get on the elevator, and I hit the button, the doors open, and just as they're closing, you know, the hand comes in, it's Kevin Kline. I was like, hello, you were really good. That was about it on that. All right.
Did you steal anything from Kevin Kline?
No, nothing. No. He was good, though. He was good, have to say. Didn't steal anything, though. No.
I remember you had the book for your class. I don't remember which class was playing Shakespeare. It was the Barton book, and I still have. I probably have 2 or 3 copies of it now. But that was my first experience was when you had us get it and read it for class. And I had, at that point, I hadn't seen the videos until you showed us the videos and stuff too. And you know, I took a lot away from that too. And those videos, we've used those videos. Stephen and I have used those videos a million times for
They're on YouTube. You can get them all now. Yeah, it's great.
They hit Netflix every year.
Just now there's so much more access to things like that. It makes it so much better, so much easier to, and no excuse for anybody to not be like, oh, I can't see that. Oh yeah, you have to do the work now because you can. It's available to you.
Right.
So
They're great. Watch them multiple times.
Oh, it just, you know, and there's one of my favorite things, McKellen breaks down Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And he goes through it, and as he's line by line, he's explaining all of the different choices that he's making. And it's just unbelievable. And then, of course, if you see his one-man show of his Shakespeare is really quite good as well. And he's so young back then. Now he's not.
Did Kenneth Branagh work with him?
No, he didn't. I asked him about Kenneth Branagh. He said no, that he did have an opportunity to work with Emma Thompson and spoke well of her, because I asked about Branagh.
Well, he was kind of the new blood coming in too.
Well, the Branagh story that I heard that I loved, Judi Dench talks about it, and they were watching the dailies early on in Henry V, and it's a great film. But there's that first shot where Branagh comes in, the doors open, and the silhouette of him coming in. And as he's making that entrance, and there are other actors in the group, and they're all kind of watching it, and she goes, "Who the fuck are you?" Pretty damn good, though. Pretty damn good.
He gave himself another similar film entrance when he did Hamlet too.
Oh yeah.
What's the Shakespeare show for you? Like everybody has that one.
I know, but it like changes on the day, you know, like just when I think it's this, it's not. Right now,
Is there one that you're dying to direct and one that you're dying to do?
yeah, that's it. The one I'm dying to, I don't know if I'm dying to direct it. I'd love to do Hamlet at some point. I'd love to direct it. I've done several productions of it, and it's such a great play. I would directorially, I'd really love to do that sometime. I'd like to play Lear. I'd like to play Falstaff, and I've not played either one, and I feel like I need to. But the opportunities are not there really. And the thing with Lear, a buddy of mine, Jack Young, just did it. And of course, he cast himself, so bully for him. It's a lot. I mean, it's just a lot. And I just kind of go, do I really want to do that? I don't know. I had an opportunity to do Gloucester and couldn't. I was doing something at Marshall, and the schedule just couldn't line up. But I like the idea of doing Lear. I like the idea of doing Falstaff. Whether I get to or not, I don't know.
Falstaff like Mary Wives Falstaff, or Falstaff like?
No, Henry IV Falstaff.
Yeah.
Those are better scenes.
Well, that mock conversation between father and son that's a pretty swell scene. So I don't know, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, I don't know. I thought of, but I'd also, Henry IV is like about where I'm at. I've always thought that was right for me. What's sad is when you realize the ones that you didn't get to and you go, oh, well, it ain't gonna happen now, you know? I mean, I still think of myself as Mercutio, and like, I got news for you, dude. You're Friar Lawrence now. You're too old for Lord Capulet. You know, I got to do Claudius a few years ago, and that was a lot of fun. That was fun. I'd wanted to do that.
You did that at Titan, right?
Yeah. Interesting story on that, though. So in graduate school, there were 14 of us in our class. And in our third year, this blessed time, we were performing Hamlet. I was rehearsing Betrayal, and I was getting ready to start rehearsals for The Cherry Orchard, all at the same time. Like in a 2-month period of time, I was going to be working on these great plays. But so when it was announced that we were doing Hamlet, of course everyone wants to play Hamlet, and I was no exception, except I knew I was going to have to sell the director on a unique take on it, because I was not the leading man in my group. So we kind of all read, and it was clear that it wasn't going to happen. So I threw myself into Claudius. I just thought, all right, by God, I'm going to get Claudius. I didn't get it. Yeah. Casting goes up, and I get cast as King Hamlet and the first player. And I'm pissed. I'm like, you know, stupid, but I was pissed. And so I see the director first day of rehearsals, and he's like, Jack, how you doing? He was this Chicago director, Nick Faust. He's a cool guy, but I was pissed. He's like, are you mad? I said, yes, I'm mad. I said, I really wanted to play Claudius. He goes, oh, no. You see, Claudius is Jack Kennedy in this production. I said, Jack Kennedy? He goes, yeah. I said, he has to be, you know, good looking, charismatic. And I'm like, you're digging deeper. He goes, no. He goes, you haven't heard my concept for this play. And I said, no, I guess I haven't. He said, this is a play about a man who sees his father's ghost. And I said, that's a good line. He said, want to see a picture of what the set's going to look like? I said, sure. Pulls out of his bag this picture. It's the picture of creation, God and Adam. He said, that's you. That's Hamlet. So all right, now you got my attention. So what are we doing with this? He goes, contemporary dress. I said, okay. He said, you're going to be all in white. I said, yeah, okay. He said, no. Full length, wool, navy pea coat, all white. Officer and a gentleman, naval cap, white, mirrored sunglasses. He said, you'll come up from hell, we'll red light you below. So he said, you'll look all red. And he said, and then the lights come up and you're all white. Okay, this will be fun. And it was a great lesson for me. It was a great lesson that, there's always an opportunity to make it something special, and you don't have to play the big part, And the first players, it was pretty good stuff too, all that Hecuba stuff. That was fun. I'd do that again in a heartbeat. That was awesome. That was fun.
Doubles down on that too in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The first player in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern was Richard Dreyfuss in the movie, but that's a great role in that play too, because it's all about them.
Yep.
Bringing
No,
them in.
it's terrific. Good stuff. So let's do Lear or Henry IV Part 1 sometime.
And Measure for Measure.
And Measure for Measure. That's a cool. I just watched it recently, just to see if it works, and it does. I think it's pretty timely that way.
People storm out in droves.
Yeah.
It's right in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, probably not. I've got to do one probably next year at Marshall. We're due for one. Looking at Much Ado, maybe. I really, really want to like Comedy of Errors more. I just can't get past the two sets of twins.
Twins are tough, man.
Just go.
We're hilarious.
Yeah.
But it should be funnier than it is. It's not funny.
Where's the comment? It's in the name.
Yeah. Have you seen the Merchant of Venice with oh God, what is it? Jonathan Pryce. So
I've seen clips of it, maybe.
oh, it's really, really good. But it just reminded me of just how hard that play is to do. When they make him Christian at the end, it's almost, it is, it's just hard to watch. You just go, what? I can't do that. I don't know if this play works anymore.
That's even harder than Shrew.
It is harder than Shrew for that reason. And he's awful. I mean, he's awful to his daughter. He's awful to he wants to cut Antonio's heart out. He embraces all of it. He reaches in, pulls out the scales. He's got the knife. He's not sharpening it on his shoe. He's not doing anything clever or funny. He wants to kill him.
And it's a comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because of the really wholesome love story in it. Oh my goodness. And talk about it. That's another one of those problem love stories.
It is.
Yeah.
Really, man.
Well, they're all problem love stories in that. I mean, because the love story with Shylock's daughter and Lorenzo, that goes sideways. And then the Bassanio thing about giving the ring away and
that was awful.
And then pick the right. It's just wrong on so many different levels. But I like a challenge.
Jack, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Been fun.